I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
On today's episode of Conversations on Dance, we are joined by choreographer Jodi Melnick. Jodi has been featured on the podcast several times to explore the range of her experiences as both choreographer and dancer, but today we focus specifically on how Jodi defines and explores the collaborative process. Jodi's latest creative output, a work for American Ballet Theatre principal Devon Teuscher, will be featured at Art Bath in New York City. Tickets are available at artbathnyc.com.
Jodi, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you. I have to admit, I had some FOMO about Vail in general, but especially about your episode with Michael and our guest host, Patricia Delgado. I remember when Michael got out of it, I was still in the hospital, as we just deduced date-wise. But he texted me, I was like, oh, Jodi was so good today. Wait till you hear it. It's going to be so great. And I was like, oh, man. And he goes, she told this incredible story. Like, you just wait till you hear it. It's going to be so good. So I get the file to post it online. And then we had a sound problem. So we missed this incredible story. And everyone was like, what about this story with Jodi?
Do you know what the story?
Wait, let me think. Oh, yeah. It was.
It's the Lost Highway story.
I was going to say, was it the opera?
Yeah.
It was the Lost Highway story. Okay.
Yes.
Let's see, many years ago, I got a phone call from this guy, I think in Vienna, Joachim Schlömer, who used to dance with Mark Morris.
Okay.
And he said, Misha gave me your number to see if you're interested in doing this opera in Vienna. And I'm like, I just want to be very clear. I'm not, no disrespect, but Mark, I'm not that interested in, I was a young dancer. So, I'm not that interested in Mark Morris's work. I don't think, he's like, oh, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in using you as a dancer and in this opera in Vienna. And it's, for me, it was a lot of money during the summer and you'll have a great time. And I was like, look, I was really gigging, and that's kind of where I made all my freelance money, was going to Europe and either teaching or performing. And the work is amazing in New York, but in my field, it's, so we would always do these gigs. So I went away and I did this great gig and I met these incredibly talented opera singers and a group of dancers, mostly from Australia, that Joachim had combined, got together. And we had this great time, but it was wild to do this opera. Even opening night of the opera, opera singers generally mark everything. They don't do things full out. So dress rehearsal or the opening night, this guy went just like full on the baritone or the tenor and like flung me across stage, and I slipped on like cabbage and fake blood and I broke my elbow, and it was like crazy. But needless to say, it was a great 6-week experience. And I go home and I get home and Joachim calls me and he said, I just want to let you know I'm doing this David Lynch opera, Lost Highway, and I would love for you to be in it. And, you'd be used as a mover, but mostly like it's an acting role. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to do it. I'm really, I knew all the David Lynch movies and I was really excited to do it. And they go and they start it, and it was in Graz in Austria. And I was with Trisha Brown in Lucerne in Switzerland, this gorgeous opera place. And I was assisting her on setting an opera. So I said, as long as I could come like 5 days after you guys start, you're okay with that? He's like, no, that's great. You don't have a very big role. I was like, fantastic. I got the script. I memorized all my 5 or 6 lines. And we get to the first rehearsal, and the 2 leads were people I knew from Vienna who were the lead singers, and we were close. And it's my turn to say my line, and Joachim is there, but he's not the musical conductor. The music conductor is one of the most famous, and I should know his name, from the contemporary Viennese contemporary orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing this, and he points to me, gestures to me, and I say, Pete, what happened to your face? The role I'm playing is the mother of the lead in Lost Lost Highway, and he's like, Jodi Melnick, excuse me, Jodi Melnick, come over here. He's like, what are you doing? This is an opera. I was like, what are you doing? Like with your arms at me. Like,
well, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? And he's like, this is a mezzo soprano role. I was like, excuse me. I was like, Joachim, can you, like, so we're all there. I said, you're aware that I'm a choreographer and a dancer. And, he's like, oh yeah, my assistant Ingrid, who is a fellow dancer, told me that you have you have a really good voice and you're a good actress. And I was like, what? Like to sing, like hanging out at a bar. So they said, look, it's a character role. You don't have to be this brilliant singer. What we'll do is we'll train you, and we'll give you like 5 or 6 days of training. We'll give you a coach, and we'll let you know how you do. So for 5 or 6 days, I like trained my butt off, like with scales, and the woman had me sing like the whole Beatles catalog, and every day I would do this work. And I got to a point, I said, just be honest with me. I can take it, So he said, no, great, you can do it. But there got to a point where I was over training, I was like over rehearsing, as I love to do. And like the leads were like, Jodi, you're sounding like you're like doing some kind of like Gregorian chant mixed with like Turkish. They're like, you just got to stop at one point and like trust your voice. And so I sang in an opera, and it was magical. I mean, it was to be on that stage with that conductor, and the first time they do that and they point to you and you're like, I don't know what any of these gestures mean.
Sure.
Like, so yeah, that was one of the nuttier things.
It's just such a scene out of a movie.
Yeah,
like,
it is
not a lynched movie, but
yeah. And the brilliant composer Olga Neuwirth, and Janelek, who I think she won a Nobel Prize or something for her writing or the libretto, but just beautiful women to work with, really fantastic.
So I wonder, after that happened, have you put all those singing skills to the test ever since then, or was that your one time I'm good?
No. I do love to sing, but no, I did not continue like singing.
Well, we can catch you singing in bars sometimes, maybe.
You can catch me singing in bars, yeah.
It sounds that way. Well, one of the things I was listening to the episode from Vale this morning, and one of the things you actually mentioned, which is a great segue into what we want to talk about today, but that you were like, oh, we could have a whole conversation about collaborations. That's what we kind of want to chat with you about today, and kind of hear your thoughts on when you get in the studio. How much of an idea do you have of what you want to do, and how much kind of comes from, like you're talking about, that collaboration process with either the dancers or the musicians, like anyone that you're working with?
That idea and that word has really changed since, I guess, like the late 80s or 90s, since I've been doing that. I think my own experience has always been that I've always felt very valued as a contributor to someone's process, and I've always really loved going really deep, and loved like that idea of opening my veins and just like giving everything to a choreographer, because I did feel very integral to their process and appreciated. And of course, in my field, I'm not talking about monetarily appreciated. That's just not the field, especially back then.
Right.
But there was also a sense that it was a different kind of generosity. You just assumed whatever we all had, we gave to each other. Nobody was trying to get one over, get someone for cheap or free. It was just what the times and what the situation was. So I never felt, because I started in that kind of world with smaller groups and freelances, I never had that feeling of that I was a submissive, non-thinking artist, dancer, human being. I never felt like just being a dancer wasn't enough or I was being taken advantage of. And then naturally what happens is, when that happens, when you think, oh, that's all too much of me and not enough of them, and you're feeling the line is blurry and it's feeling uncomfortable and you pull back. I mean, that's happened a couple times, but generally that hasn't been my experience. So that has, translated into doing my own work of having a very collaborative experience, using that word in a sense that I look forward to working with individuals and their individuality, whether it's their body type, what they bring into their work emotionally, physically, with me sort of at the helm, sort of directing and leading, and the movement stemming from my own body. But I like that the movement idea would change and morph, and they would have a voice in there. And I would feel I was having this conversation with one of my dancers, and I say dancer because it's a very young ex-student of mine. That I feel very comfortable that I could say, let's not do it. Let's do it this way, without them feeling that I'm taking some kind of agency away from her, just because of the nature of how we were working. So how that translates to the way I would work now in terms of being prepared, sometimes I'm very prepared with an idea or an image, a narrative. I mean, I'm reading something now that is sort of provoking, so that I always, part is because I love creating movement. I always have an idea of what kind of movement modality I want to use, which usually comes from me being alone in the studio. I don't think I would ever go into a studio with a dancer just cold, unless it's a true collaboration. And what I mean by a true collaboration in the way I think about it is that two artists get together and they say, I want to make a work with you. And we start in the studio and we start talking and we develop our process. It's what I'm doing right now with a very young choreographer, Maya Lee-Parritz, who was a former student of mine. And she's someone who has been a dancer in my own work, but this is a different thing, like content, context, conversations. She's going home and thinking about this and pining over it and worrying about ideas and situations just as much as I am. And it's not like, it's a relief. It's because I'm interested in having another thing, another input. But I think dancers today who come from a certain world have not felt that appreciated, or maybe they've been infantilized in a way that I have not been infantilized, and they want to have their mark, and they want to be known as just not an objectified body, which I never really experienced. So they want to have a role in this collaboration. And I believed it, and I have actually stood up for myself, and I have said, look, this is not a collaboration between Jodi and these 5 dancers. This is my work.
Sure.
And I said, these dancers know how I feel about them. This work is this way because of them. But there's something very different that they come into the studio and they're with me, and I want them to be open and exposing, but I'm crafting the work. So I don't have a problem saying, no, I'm the choreographer. It's with major contributions from them, but it's very different from me saying that Jodi Melnick and this woman, Maya Lee-Parritz, or my friend John Kinzel, or David Newman in collaboration. We are in this together, making a work together. This is both of us: costume, color, design, temperature, conversations, material. And it's not better. It's not more sophisticated. It's just very different. And I want to be very clear. I'm just trying to be very clear with a younger generation, that I'm not interested in taking advantage. I'm interested in you having this rich experience that you want to.
I think that's interesting, because I can think of situations where I think every dancer has had a moment where the choreographer in the front of the room is basically like, okay, do something,
Do something.
Right.
inspire me,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right, because then that does blur those lines where it's like,
Yeah.
well, where's the, you're not getting a choreography credit, so it's like,
Right.
where
Sorry, Michael.
no, no, yeah,
No,
so I think that it's a back and forth. It's like finding the balance, like you say, and like they're two very different things. If it is like an actual legitimate collaboration versus like, of course, the dancer inspires, the dancer contributes, but it is still the choreographer's work.
Right.
Right. I mean, I can give you very specific scenarios that I've been in like that. One is working with one of the most, for me, brilliant choreographers, Susan Redhorst. Many years ago, this is like in the early 2000s, making a incredible piece called Behold Bold Sam Dog. And it was basically a duet for myself and Vicky Schick with other dancers in it. So she was really working a lot with Vicky Schick and myself. And I was very quiet in the room. It was all, believe it or not, I'm very quiet when I'm working. And it's all about, like, I'm in the corner working on material and movement, like if I'm a dancer in your space. And at the end, I had this just, glorious, which I love, solo that was done to a very postmodern, dry choreographer. And it was done to a Beatles song, Come Together. It's really one of my favorite things I've ever done. And it was a really incredible piece. And it's so clear that my relationship with her in the studio and us getting to know each other and what she pulled out of me was very much of Jodi. And they did something in Time Out with, like, a picture of me and an interview about Sue, and then the guys from Apple Records came possibly to sue us because we were using her music, and it was a great thing. And I walked away from that thinking, in no way would I ever say that was a collaborative piece.
Right.
That was Sue Redhorst's brain and her hard thinking work. And the reason it looked that way is because she was in the studio with me, pulling that out of me and giving me material. And I was working a lot of getting things, just starting with her, picking up improvisations. But it's so, I hate to say, Jodi-esque and idiosyncratic to my body. But it's all, I would never say, oh, I made that piece in collaboration. Though she wouldn't have been able to do any of those steps. It was me, but I would never say that. That was her brain and her body and her thought process. And the same is true for, the work I've done with Sarah Rudner. And, Trisha Brown, there came a point where I was making opera work with her, and she would, get out of the chair and she would give me an idea, and then she would sit back in the chair and I'd be like, oh my God, the whole reason I want to be with you, Trisha, my whole life was to absorb your physicality. So there are these long stretches in these opera that are from my body that I translated to these opera dancers. That work I would never assume that I should have a choreographic in collaboration with Trisha Brown for that opera work. It was all because of her and her research and her being in the room. And it really does make a difference. Never once would any of these choreographers say, make something, entertain me. It just doesn't, that's not been my experience. Like, the greatest artist, person, human being, dancer, choreographer, person I know is, Sarah Rudner. And when I was started alone with her in the studio in the very early 90s, which was how I got hooked into the Twilight Company, Sarah was having really bad hips. That was when she was starting to have the hip surgeries. So we were doing a lot of talking and a little bit of moving, and she was sort of observing more and sitting and directing. So all that material that we were making was not her saying, I can't do this, you do this, entertain me. It was still a certain kind of transmission.
Right.
I don't know if that's the experience another generation of dancers, or a more balletic. Is that fair to say? Or
that's what I was going to say. Maybe it's more of a ballet thing. I don't know. I mean, those, I think those people are kind of hacks, but I've heard about like whole
names, Michael.
Oh, no, actually, I mean, it really wasn't too much of our experience. I mean, really in Miami City Ballet, we brought in great choreographers that, are certainly not hacks.
Right.
Well, but
I was just going to say, what I find interesting about you talking about this is something that Michael and I speak about all the time, is like taking your experience as a dancer and saying what you like and what you didn't like, and then transferring that to then your work later, if you're a teacher, if you're a choreographer. So here you are talking about this experience and how you felt appreciated and you felt like you were infused in the choreography, but the choreographer's voice was still there, so it's like you're really using those things that you learned and to create a positive impact on, the dancers that you're working with.
I think it also has to do with like the choreographer, and I don't say that like dancer choreographer hierarchy. Right. I don't feel that way. It's just a different skill set and a different thing you hone in on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not entirely true, right? But we could talk about that after this. I love being in, because I'm so committed and interested physically to move. I love being in the trenches with the other people in the room. And for me, that translates into a very physical transmission. As I said, Sarah in the beginning wasn't always physical because of her injuries, but then, I mean, she's phenomenal after. It was amazing. You'd think she was like a 20-year-old still. I just saw her last week, 3 weeks ago in California. She's well into her 70s. And I'm like,
wow,
just this brilliant human being. And just this mover. But like, there's a different way to be in the trenches, just not physically. And I feel like I still want to be in the trenches. And that all these choreographers I've worked with have always felt like they were in the trenches with me. And I was happy to be in that trench. And, that's not to say it's all been like pearls and roses. And, there have been times where I have felt, you do all that work and then all of a sudden you're dismissed because they don't want your work to look a certain way because you make their work look a certain way. And that can become uninteresting. And as a choreographer, I do get that, but there's a way to deal with that with the dancer, and it's hard and it's tentative, but I think it's really important as a choreographer to recognize that and to have that conversation so the dancer doesn't feel like used or disposable.
Can we circle back to something you mentioned earlier where you're talking about like you're interested in what the dancers are offering physically, but then you said emotionally, and I think that kind of reminded me of what Patricia Delgado was talking about in our prior interview with you, the two of you, that she didn't feel like she had to like check her emotional baggage at the door. Or you mentioned like working in the days following Roe v. Wade getting struck down, and that like it wasn't just like, okay, now just because you feel bad or you're upset, shut that down and we have to work and make this process happen. Like that but like how does that affect your process then? I love that you're like, let's everyone be people and like feel the feelings that you're feeling in this moment. But how do you then like use that, or what is that like? How does that affect your process?
Well, I'm not sure how it affects my process. I'm just sure that it's part of my cellular, molecular being that I absorb all that, so that when there's like that, a wholeness of a person that I'm working with. And I think that I would be remiss if I didn't say, oh, I was really negatively affected by that, or I was really downtrodden, or I felt like, there was something I felt powerful in the female body, especially at that time with these female dancers, who this woman, Patricia, gave birth to a human being. I've never, like, my God, how could you not be affected, or how could that not affect your body? Or like, I don't want to pretend that you're just this dancer person. I kind of want the whole thing, but that's not to say that it's a therapeutic session,
right,
at all. It's often like, come in and, oh my God, how are you? If you want to. I don't need to be close to my dancers that way. I just feel that it's such a familiar air. It's such a familiar ground, and it's such an intimate, knowing how they feel about things is important to me. Knowing how they feel about movement, how it feels in their body, or knowing what they're thinking is I don't know. It's important to me as a choreographer, because I think it's important to them, and I'm interested in them, right? Kind of want to like fall a little bit in love with the people you're working with.
right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, hearing Patricia talking about it, it kind of made me think, like, if I were in her position working with you in that way, where like, even if you come in, if you're feeling a certain way that day, like, because you don't have to force it away, you kind of can use that. And then you get to the therapy part of dancing, where you get to focus on something else, and kind of like it becomes that meditative thing, instead of like when you're just feeling so forced to put everything away and like be so professional. Not to say that,
Right.
It's not a professional environment, but you know what I mean? It's like, there's always that sense of like, you just have to be this, like, there can sometimes be a sense of like, you have to be this robot, and you have to work, and you have to do the same amount and work the same way every single day. And every day is just a little different.
I mean, I think a lot of it also has to do with the singularity, the individual, and the smallness of my life in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you come into the studio, there's not a table set up with clipboards and an assistant and a manager and someone. It's the circus is run by me.
Yeah.
I'm the clown. I'm the person being shot out of the cannon. I'm the one washing the t-shirt and the costume. I'm the one like popping the popcorn. I mean, and I've set it up that way. I mean, that's a whole other thing. I've set it up that way so that it is a very kind of small space.
Mm-hmm.
There is that, and I also think it's efficient. It means that when we work, like, I only have these 2 or 3 hours with you. Mm-hmm. I really want to work. Right. Or, I mean, often, like in this collaboration that I'm doing right now with this young dancer, I mean, we're all going through stuff, and I know her. She was my student years ago. But what's interesting with age, and we could talk about ageism in this kind of art world, this dance world, like, it doesn't matter that I'm so much older than her. We're kind of like have found a little bit of equal ground, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. So when there is a lot to talk about, there's a lot I could offer her in terms of, advice, whether it's personal or professional. And there's a lot because she knows me so well, and she's so eager that she can comfort me. And a lot of times we see each other and it's just like, oh my God, we just want to debrief, but we actually work through it and just say, let's work and let's go through with our idea. And then we have time, after, which I always found very productive, just to see each other or to recognize each other. I don't know, maybe it's a very female thing. Is that, I don't know, just
maybe. Yeah.
Is this, tell me a little bit more about this work. Do you have like a premiere in mind for this? Is this just experimenting in the studio? What's brought on this collaboration with your younger dancer friend? What
brought on this collaboration was I do get to a point where I'm very eager to not be the one in charge once in a while. It's sort of like a relief. And it's also really interesting for me to be pushed in a different direction, even if it's something as simple as like movement, creation, rhythm. It's nice for me to be like, oh, I want to experience that in my body, or I want to shape something that way. Right pre-COVID, we started, like I said, this young choreographer, Maya, had been in a couple of my pieces. One was a piece that I made at Barnard, and another one was a piece that I made on Governor's Island in the Moat, which called Moat a few years ago.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, I could send you some footage of that.
We'll share it to our social media. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and we just started. I got really intrigued by her own work, and we just started having these conversations. And I've always invited people into the studio with me pre-COVID, that I was like, look, I'll be in the studio all weekend. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but you're welcome to stop by and either share the space with me, or so she would come. And then we just developed this process of kind of warming up and watching each other, whether our eyes are closed or eyes are open, and kind of notating. So we've developed this thing that we get this idea when we get into the studio. We always start with the same thing, and we either just keep doing the same thing for more, adding increments of minutes on, or we said, oh, let's right away start sculpting something. Depending on what direction it's going. And it just felt like a very symbiotic, interesting, provocative way to be working with this new energy. And we both were reading the same book, Aqua Viva, by Clarice Lispector, this Brazilian philosopher, writer. And then I was reading her a biography about her, and she was like, oh my God, so Maya was reading the biography. So now we've been interested in this woman, Clarice Lispector, who I normally don't work with such specific texts, but she's a Ukrainian, Russian-born woman who, in the early 1900s, who grew up in Brazil, and just her use of rolling and stream of consciousness language and her history has been really interesting for both of us. So we kind of been talking about that. And we're starting to sculpt material that's sort of very intricate and meditative. And I don't know until we make it, but we're just in mid-process right now. And we have a showing, I think the end of the week. I have a residency at Burshakov Art Center the following week after Devon's show at Art Bath. And we'll have a showing there Saturday. And then at Weiss Acres, Kathy Weiss's space, which used to be Simone Forte's space at down on Broadway between Prince and Spring. We have a showing there in December 12th, something like December 12th. And then hopefully next year we'll bring this duet to the University of Chicago Art Center. And it'll be put on another piece that I'm making with Paul Kaiser and Mark. Oh my God, what's Mark's name? I have to get back to. Isn't that terrible? Just flew out of my head. And they are these digital video artists who did Biped with Merce Cunningham and did some Trisha Brown work. And so they were at the forefront of motion capture. And so they've done stuff with Bill T. And
how cool.
You're very busy, Jodi.
Not really. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I should be a little more busier, but I don't know. And I'm trying to get back to think if I want to dance again, which it's been a rough couple of years with my accident. So I'm trying to persevere, be resilient, and get my body back to my ankle, my foot. So hopefully I'm performing. So we'll see. Yeah.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Devon Teuscher coming up on November 12th?
Yeah. It's I met Devon in Vail.
And another Vail intro.
I don't, I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not in the ballet world at all. So I saw her a rehearsal. I'm a little bit of, I guess, a movement geek. So I always love to be around movement. So I was like, one of those days I was up on those rocks, just warming up, and she was on stage with Corey, I think, who's her boyfriend, and they were doing other dancers, the Jerome Robbins. And she did this one thing with Corey downstage left in the corner where I videotaped it. She put her hand out and then Corey went like this. And it was just the attentiveness and the lack of indulgence. And there was something extremely spectacular in the lack of performativity and the simpleness and elegance in how she touched or didn't touch, and the shape she left. My heart just like swelled, and I was like, oh wow, I love that feeling when I see dance. And later in the week she was performing the Swan Lake dance.
Yes.
And I literally stood up to leave because I was like, I just don't need to see a Swan Lake. I don't need to see another gorgeous, beautiful, nothing's wrong with gorgeous, beautiful women and dancers. But I was like, it was a little too much of the beauty quota for me. And I was just about to leave, and she walked out on stage, and I was just not starstruck. I was just awestruck by the elegant, simplistic, what she was conveying, and how I felt it was relevant to this female body. It wasn't, I just assumed it would have no relevance, but it was how she was performing this that I just felt, oh wow. And then I just was, I said, oh my God, thank you. I just thought you were stunning. And she was like, oh, thank you. I've been watching you move. And we got back from Vail, and she messaged me or something. And she said, I have this idea for this project. And I was like, really? You want to work with me? And so I called her. She told me about Art Bath. And I said, wow, this might be a really great first meeting of you and I. It's, very unconventional. It's not in a traditional space, which I happen to love, not working in traditional spaces. So Art Bath is, I don't know a lot about it. I'm sure you guys did some looking around, but Liz and this woman, Mara Driscoll from the Metropolitan Ballet Company. Is that what during COVID, they put together these soirees, and they got this space on the east side. Have you guys been to this space?
I haven't been there.
This space is incredible. It's this seemingly eccentric man, Michael, owns this townhouse, and one side is a trippy Thibus-esque cafe. And the other side is these gallery spaces that are very, grassroots, but these beautiful gallery spaces, maybe 3 or 4. And then the back space is a bigger space where they could put a piece of Marley down. And that's where they said I would do this thing with Devon. It was very vague. It's very like trying to wrap my head around it. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around it. And it has many components. There's a project where a woman, Marcella, paints this huge sculpted 20-foot dress on her that detaches, and then she leaves, and there's like another movement thing that has nothing to do with me, and another band that has nothing to do with me. And then like an hour later, the doors open and you see Devon, and they wanted me to use this painted long, huge skirt. And I was like, I love a challenge. And I also like that. I also like projects where they're like, these are the parameters. It's very,
yeah.
I was like, okay, I hate and love that. I was like, okay, so I just have this idea of this huge skirt hanging from the rafters, and Devon in it, and she coming out and doing this. I can't think of it as a dance, which is what I said last time because of the time constraint, but it's such an odd night, such an eclectic night, that it's sort of a movement experience coming out of this dress, and this wonderful experimental pianist, Adam Tendler, will be accompanying her on something that he's going to compose that's very cage-ish. We think maybe prepared piano, and then we're going to use a prepared song that I've chosen, which I'm also very reticent and hesitant, and I feel like I could pull it at the last moment and just do it in silence. But I think for this, it might be kind of nice,
Yeah.
They're describing it a little bit as like a happening, which I'm kind of like, ooh, but we'll be drinking. But the thing I love most about it is that I've gotten to spend some time in the studio with Devon, who is just exquisite and extraordinary and super interesting and smart. And so it's been really nice for me to.
Fun.
It sounds like such a cool evening. I love the kind of like.
Well, maybe you guys can come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in town.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm in Florida, but
Florida,
Michael can text me. He always keeps me updated on all these things that he gets to see.
Right.
But it does sound amazing. So, but I wonder too, like you mentioned, you're not so much maybe in the ballet world. So when you're working with Devon, how do you kind of bring in her ballet-ness, but also bring in your Jodi-ness and kind of, work with her to get that kind of different feel?
First of all, I had to go look at the space, right, and see what's available. It's very unconventional. There's a kind of a highbrow, lowbrow scrappiness to the space. Let's just say rawness to the space. So I was thinking to make a ballet and they're going to put Marley down with chairs around, it would just look so odd coming out of this long skirt, and she's in a sort of like a leotard or something that they're going to make. I just visually doing something balletic on point, it sort of translated into something a little more cheesy to me. So I was like, let's not make a ballet, and of course she was all for that. She agreed that she wasn't really interested in making a ballet piece. So I think that I have a great appreciation for a physicality that embodies both upright, line-oriented, spatial, directional intention, along with like a weighted, heavy, more guttural, nuanced. I like both of those. I think I carry both of those in my body, even though I don't consider myself like a technician that way. I think my body has those forms naturally that I could either hone or dismiss. So I automatically can relate to different kind of physicalities. And I guess without being very studied in ballet, can relate to how something is very specific in its body. And if I can translate through my own specificity and talk about it, someone as sophisticated as Devon can retranslate that. So I started with her with a very clear idea of maybe a passage of movement, like say a sentence long of movement, that I felt like, don't hold back, Jodi, just go into the body you want to be in right now and imagine you're doing it in this space. And Devon came in the first day and I just started working with her. And like I said, I had an idea of the first sentence I was going to do. And I think for a while, I just was wondering how she would react. So I just started moving. And I think when she realized I wasn't going to stop and teach it to her, she just started doing it. And then I said, I'll break it down for you. So then I could really break down something and translate it and talk about, like I started it with my finger and then my elbow, and then I could really go into the lexicon and find a very codified language that she could hook into. And then I just kept riffing on that. And I was like, oh, let me see what you got. And I was like, oh, I like that. I said, you could do it this way, or you could do it as specifically as I'm doing it, but you could do it a different way.
Oh, cool.
So we kind of like went like that.
I think this is what I love that you just said, is that you related yourselves as artists through the specificity. Like one might be tempted, like Rebecca and I love going in these deep dives with people in other dance forms that like we had no experience in. Like, for instance, the Graham people telling us like the specificity of the port-de-bras, or like at Ragamala talking about the specificity of the way they hold their feet and their fingers. And but instead of being like, oh, that makes you so different, actually, the fact that we work in forms and we are so specific, almost it's a uniting thing. I love that idea. Rather than being like, oh, that's alienating. It's actually like, I can relate to how deeply specific you are.
Right. Yeah. And then once I got we got invested in each other physically, my language can change with these kind of dancers, with Devon in particular. And I can use words like let go, direct your movement, think of this shape, initiating, articulate from this specific point of your rib cage, kiss your knees together. I could use more of a non-codified dance form language. And I also, I'm always so interested in this, female body and how we're viewed. I think I always talk about this with you, Michael, in these podcasts, is that being in control of how we're looked at and being very aware of it, and also being very aware of gesture for me, and something that's decorative. I love that. That's something that's so specific and decorative, but not like indulgent, not like, as a form of materiality. I love things, but I love very specific things. Like, I love knowing everything I own, and it's a lot. If you think about every sock or every eyeglass or something, I love having a very clear relationship and loving everything, everything I buy or purchase or touch or look at, or how I choose an orange or a banana or something. Like, there's something, I know it sounds really like obsessive, but there's something that the materiality of things I really hook into. So I was thinking about gesture and color and something decorative. And I was looking at these, Indian miniature paintings from the Mughal period. And I'm not studied. I'm not trying to appropriate. I'm not trying to imitate. I was just really interested in the relationship. I was aesthetically drawn to the relationship between like their arms and their neck and their ears, and like the tension in their shoulder, or the way their legs were like folded, and I was kind of like, thinking about that time frame and the oppression of women, and still the oppression of women in Persian and those kind of cultures, and thinking that, oh, I'm just using as an image. That was a really nice starting point, or something for me to have in the studio, just to look at these photographs of these miniature paintings that are so detailed, and you can see the sheer fabric, and through the sheer fabric, you could see their leg, and through the leg, you could see the skin, and through that, you see the back of the fabric. And I remember years and years ago going to a gallery on the Upper East Side and seeing some of these miniature Indian paintings, and just being the simplicity, the color, and the detailed, and the decorativeness was so compact and strong, and it was such a visceral feeling for me that I actually tried to take a loan out to buy one. And I mean, I got laughed out of Citibank back then. I was like, I have to have these, these miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
So for some reason, working with Devon in this very small space, and this female woman coming out of this huge dress with maybe a few gestures, and it's not like you would see this piece. It's not a piece. This maybe 5, 8 minute, 10-minute long movement sequence. You would think that. But there's some kind of warrior female gestural thing in this small little sequence that
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, it sounds so cool. And hopefully I'll be able to attend. And anyone that's listening, that's November 12th at Art Bath.
ArtBathNYC.com.
Thank you, Rebecca.
You will definitely, I don't know if there are any tickets left, but
what's cool about the ticket pricing I was seeing online is that it's pay what you wish, pay what you think you can afford, or
really?
Which is wonderful.
Here's the insider scoop on what I think is that they sold out really quickly, it's kind of expensive, right? It says I think it's like an expensive ticket, and then I think they reserve some that are like pay what you wish.
Wonderful.
So maybe if they contact me directly, I could be like, oh, put your name on the list or something.
Very cool.
Even if you just want to go there and have a coffee, it's a great. I have such admiration for these young artists who are so ambitious and tenacious and get shit done.
Mm-hmm.
Just they get stuff done. It's really amazing. I need to have a little more of that.
It sounds like you have plenty of that, Jodi. I think
really?
You get things. I think you are getting things done. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We always love having you on, and I'm sure you'll be on, in like a few months from now when we're talking about all the other things you're getting done.
When we're talking about my one-woman show, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yes, when Jodi retakes the stage, that's going to be a pod.
Let us know,
sure.
and we'll bring you back.
Oh yeah, it'd be nice if you guys wanted to come to that.
Yeah,
I'll let you know when I have the BAC. I think it's a Friday, 2 Fridays from now.
Let us know, and we'll put the information in the description of this episode too, so people can look out for that, so they have that information as well.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Jodi.
Thank you so much, Jodi.